During recording of this week's episode, one of our speakers' microphones broke. This means that you'll notice today's talk is a little shorter than usual and only has one of our speakers. The TalksForFuture team will be putting together a special Part 2 episode, which will feature Sonia Guajajara giving a talk and answering the questions that you submitted to us. We hope you'll enjoy today's talk and look out for the Part 2 coming soon.
Hi, and welcome to our fourth week of TalksForFuture. I'm Bianca.
And I'm Allison. Today we'll be learning about the indigenous fight against climate change.
We have an Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim.
Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim is an indigenous climate activist and expert from the rural pastoralist community in Chad. Hindou is the president of the Association for Indigenous Women and Peoples of Chad. She has long advocated for the inclusion of indigenous people and their knowledge in the global movement against climate change. She has co-chaired the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change at the UN and was elected as the speaker representing civil society at the signing of the Paris Agreement. Hindou is an expert on the adaptation of indigenous peoples to and mitigation of climate change. We are so happy to have her here with us today.
Thank you so much for our guests for being here. And now we can start.
Now we can move on to Hindou's talk about her experiences.
Thank you very much, Alisa, Bianca, and all the tech teams. Thanks for organizing these very important discussions. Even we can see how the world can come together without meeting physically. So that's the beautiful part of the technology. So I am coming from indigenous communities who are called Mbororo. We are a pastoralist, nomadic and semi-nomadic, living from the cattle across 5 countries in Sahel. So my people are between Chad, Cameroon, Nigeria, Central African Republic. And that's why we are nomadic and we do not use the border that put it after the colonizations, because our way of life is always depending from where is the water and where is the pastures. So that's also why we are moving from one place to another one. So from this life, from my community, we are depending 100% from the nature. So the rain coming, it's our end of the month salary. If it's not raining, so we cannot get food, we cannot get medicine, we cannot get anything. So we do not depend from the salaries of the month, but from the rain that's coming each season. And that's also make our life much vulnerable vis-a-vis to the climate change impact and biodiversity loss. So when you have your life that always depending from the pastures where our cattle can eat and that give us milk, and then during the season when it's not enough waters or it's not enough pastures, so it's impacting directly our life and livelihood. So the climate change impact in my community, it's coming from 2 ways: environmental impact and the social impact. Environmental, we are seeing the rain season becoming more and more heavy, who can come to the flood, and more disconnected from the right season that is have to come. So it's becoming much shorter. And that can be like flood today, and after 2-3 days, a drought. So it cannot allow the crops to grow up. For example, this year we did have like a very long rain season. And when the rain season ended up, where the crops just grow up normally, we say the season is ended and immediately the rain come back. So all what people planted is just a flooding. So from the scientific way, they can say we do have a very good rain season, it's a good season. But from us, we can say no, because all what people planted are flooding, and that's follow with the food insecurity. So we are seeing this impact creating a social division from the communities. So we do have the pastoralists who are my people's cattle holders, and we have a farmers and we have a fishermen. So all the 3 groups depending from the resources And when the seasons are not good, they are fighting to get access to those shrinking resources. So when a pastoralist communities leave one area, our sheep, cattle fertile the land. And after that, you have a farms who can come and settle in this place. In our way back, it is the conflict because we cannot get access to this water. So that creates the social conflict between the communities that fighting to access the natural resources. And now is becoming a fight into the death. People can fight just to get access to the drinking water, and they can kill each other because of it, because these resources are very shrinking. So I used to say that for us, the nature is our supermarket, is our hospitals. So imagine for the people in the city where in the supermarket, they just added 1 cent in each materials. I think many of them can go to the street and fight for it. But for us as indigenous peoples, our resources are becoming much high and not accessible for us. But we don't have anyone to complain or to fight, but we have to use our own knowledge to get adapt to it. So that's where it's come indigenous peoples who can come from any corner of the world. It can come from Sonia, my sister here in Amazon, or from my people who are in the Sahel, or from other brothers and sisters Sapmi in a Samiland in the glaciers. We all depend and use our traditional knowledge to get to these climate solutions. So for examples, for us, when we wanted to move from one place to another one, we don't have a cell phone where we can check it's going to rain or it's going to be hot. We have to go from north or south, but we have to check from the environment. We check from the nature. So we check from observing the size of the fruits that the trees can give. We check after observing the flowers of the plant, and we check after the wind direction, if it's coming from the north or from the south, and if the wind is heavy or it is dry. So all those observations give us information to move from one place to another one, and where we can find a water and pastures. So those are the crucial knowledge that indigenous people do have around all the world. And for examples, we can see we do not follow just the instructions that they are giving through the radios, because we don't have a radios. We follow the information given from our cattle. The concrete example is when we wanted to move around the Lake Chad, from some people who are living around the Lake Chad. And let me remind you, the Lake Chad used to be the number 5 bigger fresh water in Africa. In 1960, it used to be 25,000 kilometers squares of water. And actually now, it's just about 50 years ago, it is only 1,000, 2,000 kilometers squares of water. So 90% of this water just evaporated, disappears. And there is no any other activities that going around, is just the heat. Because in Chad from 99 to now, we did the information and we know it's already, the world is already passing through 1.5 degree. So that's why when they talk about 1.5 degree, it's for us a reality. It's not like just a anecdote that people are talking about it. It's reality that we are living. So through this area of Lake Chad, you do have more than 40 million people living and depending on these shrinking resources, from 25,000 to 1 or 2,000. And you have all the among of the peoples. That's why they are fighting to get access to these resources. But thanks to our knowledge, what I'm saying earlier. So for us, when we wanted to live around the Lake Chad, it is during the dry season, when we come and use the fresh grass who are in this wetland and use the water for our peoples and for our cattle. But during the rain season, we go far away from the lake. And how we go far from the lake? So we know that our cattle give us the examples. So they lie down, the faces them head to the south. and then they never put them head down to the floor at that time. Them head are up and the nose are up. And that we know exactly that the rain season is coming. We have to follow our cattle and move from this area who are in our north to the south part where we can get more greener and follow the rain. So that's how the exact detail of the knowledge indigenous peoples should have. We do not have to use a satellite, but we have just to use information from our animals that give us. So those knowledges are used from indigenous peoples in different areas. My sister Sonia can tell you that in her land, it might be the most diverse biodiversity because they know how to keep the balance on each species that to do not be dominant in them lands. So the climate change solution cannot be only based on science knowledge, but it also can be complete with the traditional knowledge. In my work, I'm doing that in a different way by using the 3D participatory mapping. So the 3D participatory mapping, it's using the science knowledge and the traditional knowledge coming together to give the better information to the adaptation and resilience to the peoples. But how to build this map is the most important part of the work we are doing because it's called participatory. So community do not need to go to schools to understand how to build this tool. So they need only to understand the environment. But when you wanted to do that, you have to take the knowledge from the science-based approach, the geographical informations, where you can take the specific land places and you can mark it with a GPS, which place that you want to have into the map. And after you have the science information, you can come with the man, with the woman, with the children. And that's called the intergenerational exchange in the practical way of the knowledge. So the children can come and help to build the map. And then the man can come to put a bigger repair. When I say the bigger repair, they can say, here is the mountain place, here is the river, here is our sacred place, and here where we can move during this season. So they know how to put those big knowledge. Then the women know how to put the detailed knowledge in this map because they can come after that and say, in this exact place, we used to collect our food. We used to collect our traditional medicine plant who can heal this kind of sickness. So when we combine all the 3 generational knowledge, so we end up with a 3D participatory mapping who can help the community to monitor where are the resources, which kind of resources left, and they can make a projection of how they can better manage those resources and how they can mitigate the conflict they do have between the communities to access those shrinking resources. But coming from the traditional knowledge, science knowledge, we need to inform the policies because those who are the one taking the decision in the daily base of our life. And they do that through a mechanism, sometimes from the UNs and other time from their own government. So that's where it is important as indigenous peoples, we come all together and working as one stakeholders under the Convention of the Climate Change, who is the UNFCCC. So through the UNFCCC, we have our own platform where is the Indigenous Peoples Caucus through our 7 regions who are socio-culturals. And we can meet and then discuss about how we are the front line of the climate change, but our voices are not here. They do not give us the space where we can express how we are impacted by the climate change, how we are the most vulnerable, but more how we can also share our little knowledge that we do have on environment to protect other peoples and beyond. So we do that since the Paris agreements on 2015. So for the first time, the world, after 20 years of negotiation of exclusions, they accept to recognize indigenous people's right and knowledge as part of the climate solutions, where it's ended up by a 5 reference under the Paris agreements. So one of them is the rights, of course, but both of them are the knowledge. So where they protect indigenous people's knowledge through a creation of a platform of the knowledge exchange. So for us, we say you can't have the knowledge exchange platform and discuss only by the government. You can't discuss about us and without us. That cannot work. So we have to be in the middle of each your negotiations, because you are talking about our knowledge, you are talking about our peoples, and about how we are protecting our land and the planet. So for the first time, they create a body who call it the Facilitative Working Group on Indigenous Peoples and the Local Communities Knowledge. So we are sitting together in the equal base, where there was 7 representatives from the government and 7 representatives from indigenous peoples, where we discuss on how we can include the indigenous people's knowledge on adaptation measures, on mitigation measures. But when we say adaptations, it's a bit technical for the normal peoples who we are. Because for them, it's just like adding new wording and new wording. This is the complex of this UN climate negotiation that we are really not agree with them. For us, when we say adaptations, it is how the peoples can get access to the water, how they can get access to the land, how they can get access to all the resources that they need to get them survival and to protect the nature for not only one generation, but for the 7 generations. And this is also the most important part for the Friday for Futures, because people is standing up. They're standing up for them futures. They're standing up for them presence. So all of us is standing up in this Friday for Future for our present, but for indigenous peoples is the for 7 generations that coming up. And that's also why for many of us, it is very important to know 7 last generation that you do have. Like I have to name my 7 grandfathers in order to understand how I can protect the 7 upcoming generation. So it's not about today, it is about tomorrow, and it is about every day of our life that we are making the decisions. So let me end by this. It is very important for us since yesterday, but it's more important today. Why? Because of this coronavirus. And I hear my sister Sonia also talking about this. World is getting so panicking and focusing on how we can rebuild our system to avoid this virus who do not have a solution, and how they cannot think about the indigenous peoples that get affected by the climate change in their daily life. Because we are getting killed by the climate change. People are fighting, losing them life because of the climate change impact. And now adding to the coronavirus is becoming the same. But luckily, how we can use it in the positive way in our generations. We are seeing countries like US who are putting more than 2,000 billions injecting in the economy. Europe doing the same. We have all the big countries injecting the money on how they can reconstruct a economy for the futures. So we can say it's a good thing, but this money must be impacted the real peoples. It must be invested in a right work. It can be protect all the sustainable development goal that we have. One of them is the 13, is the climate change. So we cannot have a sustainable planet without investing on fighting the climate change. And that's also why it is important that this money cannot go to help the fossil fuel anymore. We cannot agree that they put this money in the coal power, to put this money in the petrol exploration, to put this money in all this not clean energy. So they must invest this money in a renewable energy. They must put it in a restoration of the biodiversity, on the traditional knowledge, how we can better cherish and protect our environment. They must put it in our health system education, but in a fair way where it can impact the peoples, not only building always those who are the richer one, who can be the industry, who can be the fossil fuel, and who can destroy again our life. So this the way how they can learn from this corona and invest on the right peoples, and they have to invest now. Why we need equity, we need justice among peoples and among nation. We need that among also the different way of living that we do have. We have the solution in our hand, and all of us are ready to do it, maybe except some politicians and some businessmen. So that's the call for them. They have to come, because at the end of the day, they are people. Also, they are human. They can see that coronavirus do not make a difference between indigenous person or a business or a politicians, and climate doing the same thing. There is no difference. Maybe it can take longer than the coronavirus, but it can be the same. So that's why it's very important to invest in the real peoples, to invest in the sustainability, and to protect the peoples in the planet at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hindou. It was really powerful in the end how you tied together the recovery part, how important it is from coronavirus to make sure we're on the right path to combating climate change. So right now, I think we'll try to head into our Q&A portion.
All right, so thank you so much to both of our guests. And now we can start with the Q&A portion of the webinar.
So for Hindou, the first question is, indigenous knowledge has been lost and is ignored in most big cities, particularly in the global north countries. So how can we living in the global north try to incorporate these indigenous wisdoms and ways of thinking about nature into our lives? For example, as a teenager living in a big city, what can I do to help?
Thank you very much for that. I think indigenous knowledge are not only lost in the big city. In many communities who do not know how we are living, they also seems to ignore how we are using the knowledge. So to cope and come back with it, when you are living in a big city, it's to understand what is the nature. Most of the kids, when they go to the supermarket, they're just seeing a chicken as meat, they're seeing tomatoes as fruits, they're seeing all the other things, packages in the supermarket. But most of them do not know how it's growing up, how it is, and what it's need to grow up. So they're just seeing the final product. I think the best way to understand the nature and to understand the wisdom of indigenous peoples is to understand where everything is coming from. That's also how we grow up. Like personally, I grow up between the town in my community. That's how I get the chance to go to school, because my mom sent me to school. She has been a very strong woman. And at that time, she has been rejected by her own families, her own communities, because why she's sending the children to school, even the girls. And then she decided that her children cannot lose the knowledge. So after each school break, she take us to the community. So we know exactly how the communities are living. So that's why, like, even I'm now in Paris or I'm in Jamena, I know how to milk a cattle. I know the milk coming from where. I know which kind of cattle that can give you the milk. And for all the crops that we are planting, I know the seeds, the good seeds. And that's helping me to know also the different kind of the herb. So I know the names of the herb that disappear and suddenly disappear forever. Why? Because I grow up with them, because I know it's not all the herb calling herb. Everyone have his each name and how his each genes, and then you understand which one is it's good for the cattle, which one is not good for the crops, and which one can grow up in each ecosystem. So that's the most important thing, that people in the town should understand how the process of the ecosystem it is, how it's growing up. Of course, they are giving the information maybe through TVs, sometimes some channel giving a documentary, but not everyone wanting to watch a documentary. They do not do that. So while you do not understand where it's coming something, you cannot understand how you can protect it and which value that it's have. Another example is when you go to the pharmacy. Now in the big cities, they have two types of the medicine. They have the traditional plants where they can give you a special like oils without chemicals, and then they have the normal usual medicine that you can use. So why they do have that? And people seems just in a natural way, they say, oh, I'm going to the traditional medicine, that to this one, maybe it can heal me better than the chemical that they're designing. So we do have in our natural gene, in our natural systems, that the nature in us. So just to make it alive, make it a vibrant, make it survive, and ask the questions how it's come. Because everyone, even the developed countries, it's not like a big, huge building since 1,000 years. I think all the big buildings and all the big cars started in less than 1,000 years. So if we remember before the 1,000 years where we come from, I think in a natural way, we can understand wisdom of indigenous peoples, and we can respect it, and we can start rebuilding it ourselves. So we have to live in harmony. And then the last in this one, we have to understand as human beings, we are only one species of the nature. We are not the master of the nature. We are the same, like birds is one species of the nature. You have the ant is one species of the nature. Lions it's one of them, and human being is one of the species. So if we understand we are only one species of the nature, and we must share all the environment that we do have, and we must live in harmony in order to respect each other, that can help us to rebuild our own survival and our own life with the other species, and that can help us to understand the wisdom of indigenous peoples on living in harmony with our ecosystems.
Thank you. Our next question for now is, so in the past, as you mentioned, you organized the 3D participatory mapping projects to give voices to the marginalized voices in climate discussions. So the emphasis of this project is on giving voice to those people and allowing indigenous knowledge and science technology to combine together. So within the indigenous community, are there any voices still being ignored, and how can we still amplify the overall voices of indigenous people?
Thank you. Of course, 3D participatory mapping can help to give the voice to the indigenous peoples, to those who have the voice not hearing. But many still do not listening from indigenous peoples. As many still do not listening from the science. So when you take just the two comparison, from the science, I know since I get born, the IPCC started the report, the expert of intergovernmental science, giving the information, warning the entire world about the climate change impact. And before that time, indigenous peoples are warning the world of the loss of biodiversity. And the example is from my community, we say, no, we have to continue our way of life, because moving from one place to another one is giving the break to the ecosystem to get regenerated in a natural way. So that can help us to cope with our life. but no one listened until the impact become very huge in our environment, in our nature at all. So how we can give a better voice to the indigenous peoples? It's exactly what we are doing now. Even my sister Sonia, coming from Brazil, do not speak English. She get a platform where she can speak in Portuguese and someone can help her to translate. It's giving me voice as Hindu coming from indigenous communities, from a deep African countries, a landlocked, but who represent her community, who can speak with you guys. Some of you are in Japan, others in US, and helping our voices to be communicated to the other peoples in the world. So if we can emphasize giving a platform to the indigenous peoples, giving them the floor to talk themselves to the others, and to make them understand how we are living and how we are protecting each other and how we are sharing our own knowledge, that can make this world a better place. Another example we did, it's for, as I said, for the first time when in the Paris agreements, they understood the indigenous people's knowledge are very important. And then they say, oh, it's a government business, they wanted to negotiate. We say, no, you can't talk about us without us. It have to be us who can speak in our wording. And they set up this space for us and we start speaking. I think that can give space to the indigenous people's voices to be listened, to do not make a language as barriers, to do not make a technology as barriers, but to give chances to every one of us and each, and to give us opportunities to share what we have. As we are in the one planet, we must be a one voices and talk all together. That can help the indigenous peoples to also contribute to fasten the climate solutions.
Thank you. Next question is connected. So, like you said, you were there at the signing of the Paris Agreement in 2016. Now, almost 5 years later, what do you think about the extent of the progress that has been made, and how can indigenous knowledge be implemented on the national, international levels to make our process much more efficient and faster at the speed needed?
Yes. So now it's 5 years after the signatures of the Paris agreements, and when we start monitoring the progress, we are seeing some countries are doing the best to way forward, and others are taking the step back. They don't want to take the responsibility because they are seeing that it's impacting them politically. So maybe how the world can monitor how much the politicians are taking decisions in our climate. When you have a good leader, you can have a good climate outcome. And when you do not have a good leader, you can have a worse climate solutions. These connections, I think, are make it clear after these 5 years. We make some progress because many peoples, I'm talking about the real peoples, about the citizens, understood the climate change is there and it is a problem of every one of us, and we have to take a common solutions. That's a very important part. The second is you have some companies, some private sectors who say they have to change their business as usual and shift to the renewable energy. But there are so few of them. The bigger one is still in this business as usual. And the third is you have the indigenous people's voices who are a little bit listening, because during the UN General Secretary Summit in the last September 2019, we have a indigenous peoples a use as two parts who took the decisions on how the climate summit might shift to the fast solution to the climate change. But those are a very small part. When you monitor the greenhouse gases after the 5 years, I think it's increasing a lot. When you monitor a deforestation, it's increasing a lot. And at the end of the day, you say how the people are really thinking. They are still burning our forests, cutting our home. They are still using all the dirty energy to increase the carbon emissions. You have the air pollutions around all the big towns that people are getting sick. You say, how are they dare to do this kind of decisions? So I think after this 5 years break, world need to move in a very radical way to stop all the fossil fuel, to stop all the coal mining. I'm so sad just before coronavirus to hear that country like Germany are opening a new coal power. What do they need? They have all the technology to shift to the renewable energy. They have all the money to do that, but they don't want to do it. So the question is why they don't want to do it. Because they still have an influence from the lobby. So we need all to come together and to stop those lobbying team to do not go to this duty and not sustainable way of life. And finally, we need to give the voice and space to the indigenous people's knowledge. The investment, when you monitor the climate investment through the Green Climate Fund or Adaptation Fund, all the money are not going to the right places. The developing countries, you can take African countries, Asian countries, or small islands or Latin American countries, when you monitor, is the bigger countries who get the money. But the smaller countries who are the most vulnerable do not get access to this money. And when you ask why, they say, oh, they do not fill the criteria. So those criteria need to change because people cannot be blocked because of bureaucracy. Action is needed yesterday. So it has to be happen from now. So we need a very concrete action underground to the peoples, by the peoples, to the communities, by the communities. Invest on the real peoples, invest on indigenous peoples, invest on youth, invest on women. Those three parts must be the one who can lead the world. It is our present, but it is also our futures, and we know how to fix it. So we can't anymore accept the upcoming 5 years to be the same like these 5 years ended after the signatures of the Paris Agreement. It have to change radically and now.
Thank you. Next, thank you for your very in-depth answers. Next, I think I'm going to be moving on to the final question. So this is for our audience. How can non-Indigenous strikers and activists show our solidarity and support for Indigenous rights? How can we help give you the platform you need?
So the non-Indigenous peoples can give more attention to the Indigenous peoples. Living in solidarity is the most important. We saw that during some of the climate actions. Last year in the COP in Madrid, we saw Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples come together and having platform to speak. And how this solidarity can work. You can take a concrete example from an Indigenous person. And you can give them the voice, you can give them the space. You can do that through the media because it's very important to channel our information through the media. It can be an audio, it can be a video, or it can be a newspaper. So it depends from which one. But you can share the information directly on the ground. As you are seeing here, I'm sitting with my community, with the men and women who do not speak any other language than our mother tongues. But they do understand the environment more than anyone in these places. So how to give them the voice to share the visual that they do have, to share the life that they do have. The broader audiences can participate on indigenous people's fight by helping to build the capacity of indigenous peoples on sharing the knowledges. They can do it by also giving them on the indigenous peoples financial need or technical need to put all the knowledge in the package where they can share for the generations and for the generations. I do that through the 3D mapping, but through also the 2D participatory mapping. And I give you the example on a wonderful project that giving the indigenous people's voices, the project that we are doing with UNESCO. We try to compare the season change and then the season fix from a different ecosystem. And we found our seasons are much rich because they are ecosystem based. You can have just around Lake Chad 5 seasons, the South, the 7 seasons. So how the both communities can exchange together. And we cannot do that without the support of the broader audiences. And then the broader audiences can share those informations with us. And then they can give our voices to the other peoples to understand how we are experiencing, how we are living, and how we are doing this sustainable life. And another thing is how to support indigenous peoples to share the information across each others. I can share my information in my communities with my sister Sonia in Brazil. Even she's in Brazil, we all both depend from the same land. And to make the bridge like you are doing it now, 3 or 4 of you here in this Friday for Futures are making the bridge between the 2 communities and making the knowledge exchange among us. So that can help the world become a big village where the indigenous people's voices can be heard and shared through other species that we need.
Thank you so much, Hindou, for your very, very insightful answers. I think that's it for the Q&A portion. And thank you once again, both of you, for coming on to Talks for Future today and telling us about your stories and your experiences.
It's a great pleasure, and thank you for having us, and thank you for organizing that. And hopefully it will be not our final, it will be just at the beginning, and we will be happy to share any thematic discussions with all the youth around the world. And if you think some of our talks are very technical, we can do it in a very simple way. So Sonia, I, and many other indigenous brothers and sisters around the world can be very happy to join it. And now let me also tell you, this man-made problem must be a woman-led solutions. So we are there to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you.